Recently on the From the Heart Discord, and something that you personally can go join, it's right down in the description, and feel free to do so. One of you fine members actually sent in some screenshots, some things that I thought were very interesting, some things that would be Batman actually hanging somebody from a plane and explaining that his death in this fashion would be for the better. And I thought to myself that this is really something I've never seen happen in the Batman franchise, and from there I needed to do some digging. So I looked through this giant shelf, this tome of stories, and what I actually happened upon, and something that I totally even forgot I had, was this Batman, the greatest stories ever told. Something that I haven't even read yet, but upon actually going through a couple of these stories, I managed to find the exact one where this thing was actually showcased. And from that point, I knew that I needed to actually cover it, to actually give us all a bit of a taste of what Batman used to be around the 1960s all the way to the 1970s before he turned into what he is today. This awesome, very adult, brooding bat that we've come to know and love. And what this story would actually hold is a story about Hugo Strange actually breaking out of prison, then breaking into Arkham Asylum, stealing a couple of these insane people, these ne'er-do-wellers, and these nut jobs as one man explains, and actually turning them into super soldier mutants. These 15-foot tall creatures that would go into the city and kind of distract the police while actually killing dozens of people in the process. Also, Hugo Strange and his posse could actually rob banks without anybody interrupting them. And while it is an extremely silly story, as most of these things are inside of this book, it was nonetheless something that caught my attention. So before we actually jump into this thing, I just want to give a huge thank you to Sleazy Juan for actually giving me some inspiration, some material to go off, and a story for me to sit and tell all of you. So if you see him down in the comments, tell him hello, and if you enjoy this video, you can basically just tell him thank you. And so, without a further doubt, let's just jump right into the introduction of this story. Already an almost legendary figure, the cowled shadow of Batman prowls through the night, preying upon the criminal parasite, like the winged creature whose name he had adopted. And all while an innocent metropolis sleeps, little does it realize that huge, terrifying man-monsters shall soon stalk the streets and bring to them havoc and destruction. And little does Bruce Wayne suspect the fate shall touch his shoulders and single him out as the one to do battle with these monsters, as he goes forth and clad in the garb of the weird and the menacing Batman. And with the next shot, it would be described that Bruce Wayne a long time ago has actually seen Hugo Strange be brought into the prison system. But as we look towards the artwork, we'd actually see this man pulling a bit of an uprising, actually rallying everybody inside to begin to grab the guards and to specifically grab the warden to use him as a human shield. And from here, and ultimately, he would be free. And with the next shot, he would be ransacking Arkham Asylum, taking some people for prisoners, or more so, test subjects, telling his henchmen to get them out quickly as one of them actually shouts out, "Come on, nuts." And upon first reading this, I wasn't sure if it was actually somebody's name, the word nuts. But it more appeared to be this man just actually insulting these people. And from here, Hugo Strange would go on to bring these captives to his secret headquarters. And with the next couple of panels, we would see Bruce Wayne just kind of sitting in his chair, smoking a pipe and listening to the nighttime news, as it would go on to describe that people have actually seen this Hugo Strange breaking out of prison and then once again breaking into Arkham Asylum and actually busting a few of these people out. And all Bruce Wayne can really think to himself is that a man like Hugo Strange, a man so capable of bringing such terrible things to Gotham City, can only be coming up with something most fantastic and even more so terrible. But for the next month, nothing really ever comes of this. Batman just proceeds to kind of sit in his chair, and the townspeople of Gotham just kind of go about their days until one day, finally, a giant 15-foot tall monster begins to ravage the city. And with this, I can't even imagine the amount of death that would pursue with this victim, as we would see this man actually picking people up, throwing them towards the ground, and then eventually going and actually picking up a giant telephone pole. And as all the police continue to kind of chase this man, coming in groups of 15 to 20, he would take this said pole and he would actually swing it through every single one of these people. And if you really think about this logistically, this pole itself would have to weigh at least 200 to 300 pounds. And I really don't think that any of these people could really survive such an incident. We've seen the Batman break people's spines, we've seen the Batman spine broken. But to see such a large metallic object being swung through the bodies of all these different people, it is definitely a tragedy to behold Gotham City, and something that would continue to persist throughout the next 3 days. But as this telephone pole would continue to smash through these people, to utterly decimate kneecaps, and to absolutely absolutely crush skulls. The people of Gotham City would essentially witness this 15-foot tall man running towards this red semi-truck, the only thing that could really accommodate such a man. And as he sits in the back, we would see a police officer yelling, "Step on it." But sadly, as they're going on chasing the semi-truck, we would see a stick of dynamite or whatever kind of explosive this 15-foot tall man would actually acquire and throwing it directly into the windshield of this police officers, sending their car flying in a roar of flames. And with the next panel, we would once again see Bruce Wayne listening to the radio. "It could be the work of only one man, Strange. If I know Professor Strange, there will be more, and I must put a stop to him." And obviously, Batman has already heard that Hugo Strange had made an escape about a month ago, but I really don't see how this series of events is any different from any of his other villainous enemies. Because it would seem that in Gotham City, anything can pretty much happen. Whether you're a mad scientist or just the Joker himself, it seems that these people are always figuring out different ways to actually create monsters. I mean, for God's sakes, I just finished a Poison Ivy story where she was literally turning people into psilocybin mushrooms, trying to decimate the entire planet, and while doing all this, creating these weird mushroom-like creatures. These are things that are constantly partaking throughout Gotham City, and I guess at this point, I really just don't know Hugo Strange's brand of terror. And when the next day comes to show its ugly face, this terror would only continue to pursue, with another giant 15-foot tall monster coming and utterly just smashing people into the ground, grabbing more telephone poles and actually collapsing the subway bridge, and once more making a great escape in this weird red semi-truck. Only this time, a new pursuer will be in the vicinity, as we cut to the next panel and we see Batman himself sitting in the Bat plane. And when I say Bat plane, it's not just because it is Batman's plane, it is because it's literally shaped like a giant bat, with giant bat-like wings and even a bat head. And of course, you can't really have a bat without a giant Gatling gun. And with the following panels, we can actually see Batman land this plane in 2 minutes or under, or at least that's what the panel describes. And from here, we will witness the Batman walking towards this very strange barn in the middle of absolutely nowhere, walking into the 2 front doors as the only thing that he can really see is complete darkness. And even Batman at this point realizes that this is a trap, that very clearly if he walks in here, something very terrible will happen. But nonetheless, he figures that he needs to chance it, that he's the only man at this point that could possibly stop Hugo Strange. So what does he do? He literally just walks right in. And with the next panel, we would just see 2 giant hands grabbing the Batman and lifting him straight up into the air. And as we're looking at the next panel, we would see a very small Batman in comparison to these 2 giants, and something throughout the story that really gave me a bit of a giggle, as it really does just look like a miniature Batman trying to fight these regular sized people. And I understand that this is an older comic book, that this is kind of the starting point of Batman, but to actually see some of these drawings and not kind of get the perspective right, it just makes things a little bit more silly. And honestly, it's something that I did enjoy throughout this story. And there's really nothing better than a tiny crime-fighting Batman. But as he's being held up in the air, he begins just saying, "Good evening, gentlemen." And with this, Hugo Strange would enter the room and automatically tell him everything about his plan. And once again, I don't really know how many times I need to preface this, that if you are an evil villain, that you don't need to tell anybody shit. That if you have enemies that are coming to stop you, and it's a common well-known fact that they will stop you, maybe it's time to actually put these people down. But as we're looking at this tiny Batman, Hugo Strange would appear with a whip in his hand. "I've caught you, and very neatly too. Ah, I expected to see your ugly face around here. We meet again, Professor Strange. Now that you've got me, I don't suppose I'll live very long. Grant me a dying man's request, and tell me how you created these monsters and why." "With the greatest of pleasure, my dear Batman. If you will look closely, you will recognize their pictures in the papers. They are all escaped lunatics. And these are monsters. I made them. I discovered an extract that speeds up the growth glands. I inject the fluid into a normal man, and the sudden growth not only distorts the body, but also the brain. And soon, he is a monster." And from this point on, Hugo Strange continues to explain that he's going to use these monsters to wreak havoc in the city, to actually bring all the cops into one place, to bring everybody out of a certain area so him and his henchmen can go rob banks. But at this point, we've already seen these giant 15-foot tall monsters actually break people down, actually smash crashing the entire police force with a telephone pole, and I can't imagine at this point in time Gotham City has too big of a police department. Because how many people can sustain all these injuries and then have them still recruiting new people? But nonetheless, Hugo Strange has yet another plan, as he begins to explain that it is finally time to abandon his secret headquarters and to initiate all these different bank heists. But before they leave, he would inject Batman with the very same serum that he injected into these giant monsters, these victims of Arkham Asylum, and people in the story that basically have no worth to anybody else anymore. And this is something that really caught me off guard, because in the modern day Batman, if you were to come across such victims from Arkham Asylum, these people literally made into monsters, you would think that he would probably go on to try and find a way to save these people. But not here, as later on we'll see a complete disregard for life. And as Batman is trying his absolute best to actually get away from these people, to not be forced to take any kind of injection, he would call Hugo Strange a fiend. And in return, Hugo Strange would merely tell Batman that he should never talk to his master this way, that soon he will become one of these giant monsters, and soon he will be under the control of this very man. And with this, Hugo Strange would get his way, and he would inevitably stab this needle directly into Batman's bicep. Observe the clock, Batman. It is exactly 6 o'clock at night. The serum takes 18 hours before it works. At precisely noon tomorrow, the serum will take effect. And with the next panel, we would see one of these giant monstrous fists actually come crashing down on Batman's chin, completely knocking him out. And when we actually get to the next panel, we would see Batman once again waking up in the strange facility and realizing that he's almost slept exactly 18 hours. Now, I don't know if you could choose how many hours you're going to knock somebody out with your punch, but that would seem exactly what this monster has done. But with this bit of knowledge, Batman could not be any more worried. But with the next panel, we would see Hugo Strange talking to his henchmen, getting ready to unleash his plan and making sure everybody executes it perfectly. And with the next panel, we would reach our very first fatality done by Batman himself, as he's realized that these people have taken his utility belt with no noxious gas, with no batarangs, with no grappling hooks. He is left with only one final decision. As he sits down on his haunches and he reaches towards his feet, and we would for the first time realize that Batman has yet another utility shoe. And the thing that lies within it, something so devastating, as this man would actually have the compounds to make a bomb right there and then. And with this little bit of crafting, he would create this bomb and throw it directly into this truck with the 3 men, completely exploding it, and once and for all, we would know what Batman is really about. Because Batman might be safe when he's being watched in his city, by all his peers, by all the citizens, but when he's locked in the secret headquarters, anything goes. And as the exploding truck burns, the building would follow and sue. And suddenly Batman would leap out of the door, and Hugo Strange would be blown back, realizing that his captive has finally made his way out. And while Hugo is screaming at the Bat, Batman would take none of this. He would wind up his right hook and punch this man directly out of the window, revealing that they're actually on the top of a cliffside and potentially causing the second death of this story, sending Hugo Strange to a 30-foot drop to the water below. And while this man falls to his potential death, Batman wonders if this is really the last time that he'll ever see Hugo Strange. When suddenly this is cut short and Batman realizes that he only has about 5 minutes until the serum that was injected into his body is going to kick in, to make him into one of these monstrosities and to completely befuddle his mind forever. And as he turns around, he would see the next onslaught of these giant 15-foot creatures. The rest of the monsters, there's still a chance. Although your bulletproof clothing protects you from bullets, it doesn't from this. And essentially, Batman finds a giant hooked cane, something to actually open the skylights, and he would actually be using this as a grappling hook, launching himself into the air and actually trying to avoid any punches towards these creatures' clothing. Because like he said before, they're bulletproof, they're made out of Kevlar. Somehow these nice t-shirt and pants just cannot be penetrated by any kind of machinery, bullet, sword, or dagger. And with the next move, he would actually use this giant cane to trip up one of these monsters and actually make it fall into the other one. And for some reason, these monsters can be controlled by Hugo Strange, they can follow basic orders, but when they're knocked against each other, they would actually begin to get very angry, seeing that the other one is just pushed into the ground, and they would begin to fight to the death with each other. And with this little moment, with these two monsters for whatever reason actually trying to kill each other, Batman would suddenly find a science lab directly behind him, with all the components to actually make an antidote, and something that I just found extremely ridiculous, because just because you have the items to actually make such a serum, doesn't mean assuming you have the ability to actually reverse such a cause. After all, their bones have grown, their skins have grown, and unless he has some kind of shrinking gun, I just don't really see how any of this would work. But nonetheless, Batman injects himself with this newly found serum made in about a minute and a half, and he realizes that he's actually beaten Hugo Strange by just about a minute before the clock actually hit the full 18 hours, and how he knows this by the exact minute, I have no idea. But as he looks back, he would see the next two casualties. They've killed each other as I hoped. They are now dead. Two still live. They're in those trucks. One is on Daly Avenue, and the other on Post Road. I can still catch them. And with this planned murder by Batman, he would get back in the Batplane and take off to the sky, heading for Post Road first as he begins to soar above one of these red semis once again, Gatling gun and all, ready to bring death upon anybody. It won't be long now. What a cinch. The monkey in the back starts a riot, kills a few people, and we crack a bank. A sweet racket. And with our next panel, we would finally come to the scene that was sent to me in the Discord by you, Sleazy Juan, of Batman holding this Gatling gun and actually remarking that while he doesn't want to kill these people, that essentially he must. And it's at this point that I kind of realized that the real Batman would have some kind of grappling gun, anything that could knock this truck over on its side, but apparently guns and bullets was the way back then. But nonetheless, Batman would rain bullets down on these people, and utterly splitting their skulls open and sending this truck absolutely flying. And as it crashes into a nearby rock, the monster behind would still be remaining alive. After all, it does have the bulletproof clothing and it would begin to run. But Batman has another plan for this, because apparently he does have some form of grappling hook. He has a giant rope. And what he does next is something I find so dark and so absolutely hilarious, and something that honestly reminds me of a story out of Junji Ito. As he begins to drop down this massive noose and continue to fly, chasing this monster as he's running around for dear life trying to escape his inevitable end, and actually hooking this noose around this man's neck, and essentially hanging this creature from the sky, dragging him around, and the only thing that I can really think of is this little scene of a tiny plane in the night sky with a gentle motor tick as we see a giant hanging body hanging from a noose. And with the next scene, we would actually get to see Batman saying that maybe this is better. Which to me is so wild, that these giant monsters would start from victims from Arkham Asylum, literally kidnapped by Hugo Strange, and he doesn't really try to do anything that would reverse these people. He makes a serum for himself, but he doesn't really, people are just dying left and right. They're being gunned down by Gatling guns. He's letting other people fight each other to the death, even though they don't know any better. And it's a side of Batman that we need to keep on our minds for future use, because later on, as we go up on his high horse spouting that no one needs to die, that he would never kill, we can look back, and we can know the truth. But as Batman's flying around for just a little bit longer, he decides that it's finally time to stop making this body a trophy, and he pulls out a knife and cuts the rope and sends his body flying to the ground. But nonetheless, there is still one more of these red semi-trucks in Gotham City, and the monster has finally escaped, and everybody in town is just kind of running around, trying to get away from this thing, as we've seen the brutality that it can actually bring to its surrounding area. And for some reason, this creature knows that Batman has kind of befuddled all of his brethren, and he sees the Batplane up in the sky, and he decides that he's going to climb the tallest skyscraper to actually be able to fist fight with this plane, even though it can basically just keep a radius around this thing. And I know these monsters have kind of, dumbed down brains, but at this point, I'm just like, where's this logic coming from? But nonetheless, this creature is climbing to the top of the building, and while Batman knows that his bullets can't affect this creature because of its very finely tuned clothing, what he does have is his utility belt back in action. And what he actually has is his noxious gas pellets. And as this creature stands on the top looking like King Kong, beating his chest in, he would throw these pellets and this monster will begin choking, and inevitably fall off the side and once again fall to his death. And while this is essentially the ending of our story, Batman would have one more thing to say. There goes the last of the monsters. Yet I have a feeling that the biggest monster of them all was Professor Hugo. Does he still live? Perhaps we shall meet again. Perhaps. And that is the end of this very old story. Something that I couldn't honestly come out here and tell you some dark story about a Batman actually murdering people. But nonetheless, you could almost say it's a little more scary because of how campy this thing is. Because of how serious Batman is, while at the same time his actions being so funny. And it's just a very interesting light to actually see Bruce Wayne in. To see this man gunning down human life with a Gatling gun. To making these monsters actually fight each other to the death in utter confusion. And it's just a story that I will title overall I thought was a lot of fun. And it's something that I'm going to have to start reading this thing more, to see some of these older stories, to actually get an idea of the origin of Batman. There's also another one in here about Crime Alley and how Batman kind of visits us every year to meet a certain somebody who helped him after his parents' death. And while that story was a little bit more sweet, it also features enemies of the name of Gooch, which I don't know, maybe back in the day that was a popular thing, but nowadays has a little bit of a different meaning. But overall, this is a book that makes me appreciate of what we have nowadays, of these really awesome adult comic books that Frank Miller, Neil Gaiman, James Tynion, all these people have taken Batman to a completely new level, and pretty much any other comic book series from the 80s and onward, as they started getting a little more darker, a little more serious. And also for a lot of this, we can thank Alan Moore for actually starting to break the comic writer's code and things like that, and just making these things what they are. But yes, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that silly little story, and hopefully the next time we'll get to something a little more serious. But as I said, Sleazy1 in the Discord, and something you can join too, happened to show me that weird panel of Batman dragging that body up from his plane, hung by a noose, and it's something that I'm very glad that I actually had, because I was about to order online, but instead I could just come up here to my personal library and pull it directly off the shelf. And hopefully we'll get a couple more stories out of this thing. But anyways, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on the next episode. If you're new here, hit the like, maybe subscribe, check out some other stuff. You can join the Discord if you want to talk to me personally, as well as a bunch of other people that hang out on this channel. We've been having a lot of fun over there. If you're anybody who kind of writes short stories or anything, you can post them in the chat. Everybody will kind of read them and kind of give you ideas, all sorts of things. But anyways, everybody, have yourself a fantastic day, and I will see you on the next episode of From the Heart.